Okay, let's get started. Let's create a new web application project in Visual Studio. I'm going to choose ASP.NET Core MVC model view controller pattern. Create this. I'm going to name this Square YouTube demo. I'm going to place it in that location for my Git repository. Long-term configure. Do not use top statement. That's fine. Default. All right. So Square has the ability for you to Square has a Square API Explorer, so let me bring that up right here. And if you have a Square account, you should have this. And I'm in the sandbox environment. So basically, in today's demo, I'm going to use an MVC app to access this catalog API, list catalogs. At this moment, you could just click sign in, and it will. I'm going to bring this over to a different screen. So to sign in. Now that I'm signed in, you can say get access token. I'm in the sandbox environment, get access token, and it'll have a drop down right here. And I can actually execute this query here to find every item that's in my sandbox environment here. And let me bring up that sandbox environment to show you what I'm saying. So let's do Square SDK dashboard. So Square has a sandbox environment for you to play around without actually interacting with your. So if you go to developer.squareup.com and apps, you'll see this default test account or basically a test account for you so you can actually play with that live dashboard. So I think I clicked open, right? Did it open another window? No? Let me just click open. Yeah, there we go. So I want to take a look at basically my items category because that's essentially an item according to Square in their API as a catalog. And currently I have 4 items that I've added here. So if we take a look at this JSON message here, and I have a type filtering for item, and if I were to copy this over into a Notepad++, I'll format this as JSON, and I'll collapse everything. Let me collapse everything that's under items here. So you see that there's an item here, an item there, and if I expand item data and then collapse the variation data, see that's Tito vodka and Bud Light. So it's important that you understand the data structure, how the data is actually, the hierarchy is. So item is considered a catalog item, and inside there's variations. So Bud Light or Tito's is an item, right? Inside there's a variation called 750 ml, and its price is, if I scroll, let me try to get them all onto the same screen here. All right, that's better. So if you take a look at this, the price for this is 1,999 cents. So we're going to have to handle that and to translate that into dollars. And then for the other variation, 1 liter, this one is basically $24.99 in US dollars. And then same thing with Bud Light. Let me just collapse this item and look at Bud Light itself. Same thing. Bud Light is an item. Inside there's a variation called 24 pack. Its price is $24.99. And then there's another variation called 6-pack bottles. The price is $8.99. I've also put SKUs in here, basically the barcode so you can scan. Anyways, now let's go to the code. Um, First things first, let's go back to that. Actually, let's go back to that Square dashboard, API dashboard here, and get the access token. So I'm back in the Square dashboard, developer dashboard. Open this up. In the sandbox environment, it gives you a application ID that you can connect with, and this Square access token. What we're really interested in is this access token. So let's just copy this, and I'm gonna keep this in a notepad here just so that I have a place to put this. So access token is that, and we want our application or web FVC app to be able to use this key. You can keep this in your application config file, environment variable, and such. But I'm going to choose to use environment variable because in my following videos I'm going to show you how easy it is to change between the sandbox and production. So now let's go back to Visual Studio and actually create this environment variable. So this is our default blank application that's created by Visual Studio. If I go to right click on the project level and go to properties, and then I go to debug, and then open this debug launch profile user interface UI. Inside here, I want to paste this environment variable to access token, and I want to name it Square Sandbox access token. All right, and then once I have that, then I can just close this, and this should save it. Now, for me to able to access it, I need to add the Square SDK as a NuGet package. Now I can add this directly on the web project, or the best practice is actually to add a new class library on the side and then reference it. So I'll type in class library. I believe that's the right type. It's class library. Let's say Square YouTube service. All right, so now it's adding. It created a default class. I really don't want that, so I'll delete that guy. Bring my notes over here. Then now if I right click on dependencies and hit manage NuGet, so I can add the Square SDK or NuGet package. So I'm in the browse tab. I'll just type in Square. You want to make sure that you're using the right version. So it's Square by Square developer platform, and it's the .NET standard and above version. This is the one that's their latest and greatest. So latest stable version 25.2.0 will do. Install, and that should be done. And I can expand this to make sure that it's actually installed. Yep, it's installed. Okay. Now we want to follow best practices, so I want to use dependency injection. So I'm going to create a couple interfaces. So I'm going to right click on the project and create a new folder called interface. For this first interface, I'm going to name it, I need to create a client to be able to connect to Square. So I'm just going to name this, use some dependency injection magic to create a Square client factory. I'm going to name this Square client factory, name it correctly. It's an interface, and inside this I need to expose a property with a type of Square client, and I'll just name it SQ client to be safe. So now I have this interface. Now I need to create the implementation. So I'll do this naming convention wise, Square client factory. And in the Square Client Factory, I want to implement the Square Client Factory interface. Now I have ReSharper turned on, but so it gives me that I need to actually implement that property. So I'll just say if implement missing member, it'll create this property for me. Now for the dependency injection to work its magic, I actually need to create like a constructor for it. So anytime dependency injection tries to resolve an I-square client, it's going to call this constructor to create a client to execute this logic. So now I want this the Square client inside this implementation to equal to new Square client, the actual from the SDK API itself. And Square API uses something called a builder pattern. I'm not an expert on it, but just follow it. So inside this builder, you need to give it an access token. And our access token is actually stored in an environment variable. So I'm going to type in environment. And we don't want to use the Square environment. We want to use the system environment dot get environment variable. And the name of that variable is surrounded in quotes. And I have it in a notepad called Square sandbox token. All right. Now inside here, I also need to actually provide it an actual Square environment that I want this client to connect to. So there is a handy dandy enumerable provided by Square API call. So I can just say sandbox right here, and then as lastly call the build. Now that would create a Square client. Anytime that I try to inject an I-Square client factory into any of plays I try to use this, it will new one of these up using the environment variable that's stored in the configuration, and it will create a connection to the sandbox environment and call build. All right, so that's that. So for us to be able to use it, we need to register it on the MVC app to tell it that anytime that to the DI, the dependency injection container. So the way to do that is you go to the program.cs or startup.cs, depending on what version you have. But regardless, it goes builder services. You have to do like add transient, and it takes two generic. So in this case here, our first one is actually called I-Square Client Factory, and then Square Client Factory. It's got squiggly things in there because I didn't do the project reference. I have ReSharper open. It's smart enough to say that, hey, you forgot a reference here. But if you don't have ReSharper, you can simply right-click on dependency and say add project reference, and then pick YouTube Square.YouTube demo dependency. Right-click on there, say add project reference. I want this project to actually reference this Square.YouTube.service project. I hit OK. And then in this case here, we're just missing the namespace. So let's import the namespace. Now it's happy. So now for our home controller to be able to use it on the home page, we just need to go to the controller itself. In this case here, home controller is the main controller on this blank MVC application so far. So I just say I-Square Client Factory, give it a name for this parameter, and I'm going to use some ReSharper magic to save me some writing. But basically, it's assigning this this parameter that's being injected in, and then assigning it to a field as a private read-only field for me to use in a bit here. So far, let's just press play, see so far what do we have here, right? And I'm going to put a breakpoint on on line 16 to make sure that dependency injection is working correctly. If this throws any errors, it means something is not right at the moment. But let's see here. Launching. And I'm gonna hover over this. And so far this guy is not null. So I think everything is working okay. So that's okay. So I'll let that play. And I'm gonna actually use Visual Studio's hot reload. Turn that on. Now for me to be able to use it, because this is the index page here, and I want to go to the view, and I'll change this view to say Square. Oh, come on, I can type demo and then Control S to save, and it should reload. Yes, it did. I'll just take off the breakpoint, and there you go. Welcome Square YouTube demo. Now for me to use it, it's pretty simple. I can say var catalog is equal to, because I want to use this API that I showed you right here in this list catalog here. So I want to use this Square Client Factory. Oh shoot, Control V. I did a cop. I'll just start typing that instead of that. Dot Square Client, and inside that Square Client, there's actually a catalog API already, and the one that we want is list catalog. It's exactly the same as the Explorer here. And as a matter of fact, if you want the C# code for it, you can just come back over here on this side here and change this to C#. And you'll see that you can actually get the code as exactly as it is. All you need is a client, which we generated through these dependency injection. So you know what? Let's just copy this and paste this into our code here, right? The only thing is we just need to replace this client with our Square Client dot SQ client. And because this is trying to be an asynchronous call, so I actually need to change this to be a async task of I action result. And that should actually work. So let's give it a shot. All right, save. Multiple endpoints exist. You know what? Let's stop this probably hot reload being stupid. What I did is I stopped the debugger and then restarted it. Okay, so that obviously hit that breakpoint. So let's hit F10, step over it, and to see if it actually goes to an error. It did. What is the error message? HTTP, not okay, but why? Query item, error 0, authentication, could not be authorized. Code could not be authorized. I used the wrong code. Let's go back over here. Square application sandbox token. You know what? Let's just replace this token. Show. Okay. Save that. Done. Unless I did something stupid on this side. Sandbox, get environment variable. Square sandbox environment. Didn't hit. Everything looks correct. Let's see what happens. It's good that we got that error though, because that kind of shows what we're working with. Okay, so that didn't error out, so obviously that worked. So let's actually catch that breakpoint there to make sure that there's the same items actually exist as being returned. Refresh. Why aren't you hitting that breakpoint for me, buddy? Okay, there we go. Oh wait, so the results is there. There's 2 in the results, both items, and inside there is item data, kind of very similar to that I was showing you earlier, and then inside there's two variations, and inside there is so in this case here, this is Tito vodka. So the API seems to be working. Let me remove all these breakpoints. So next, I want to display this to the user to this page here. So first, we need a couple models here, view models. Let's actually just come into here and the web application, and I'm going to create a folder call. Actually, there is a folder called models already, so I'm just going to delete this new folder I just accidentally created. We'll leave it for now. We'll add a model. Oops. Wrong button. Let's see. When I clicked, no, exit out, hit. Okay. Try again. Models. Right click, add, new item. I'm going to name this item view model. Inside here, I'm going to create a property call, that's the type of string, call item name. All right. And then I'm going to create another property call item, or actually variation name. Actually, let's create a couple more properties. One of them is called a catalog object ID. This is essentially the primary key for the item. So if we actually take a look at the object itself that's returned back from a JSON, it's an object, it has an ID. This is essentially the primary key for the object itself. And inside the variation, there's a variation ID. I kind of want to store that information as well. So I'm going to flatten that out and store it. And then I'm going to store the item name, which is here. And then I'm going to store the variation name, which is here, the SKU, along with how much it costs. And also what I want is, I think there's another property that I want, category ID. This will essentially tell you like what category. We can look it up and reverse it to see what category this item belongs to. So I want to store that too. So let's create all those properties. So I got catalog object ID. That's that. That's the primary key for the item. And then make a copy of that and name it variation ID. So that's the primary key for the variation itself. And then I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to name this category ID. Essentially, this is an ID to look up back to like what category this item belongs to. And then I'm going to go create another property called SKU to store the barcode. And I'm going to create another property with decimal type store the price of this. Let's see what it actually is called in here on the screen. So this is price money. So let's just say decimal price. That should do for now. All right, so we have a way to map this in there. So let's say after the result is received, for each var item in the result dot, I believe it's inside a context or objects actually. So remember, these objects is basically we're looping through the outer iteration of this, right? At the item level. So I'm going to create a variable called view models equals new list of item view model. This should give me a new items for this. So now we're going to create a var view. Let's call it item view model as a local variable equals new item variable. And at the end of that, at the end of this for each, I want to add this. So view models dot add item view model. Fix the syntax. All right. So for each one of these, so at the item view model, the item name should be equal to the item dot. Now this item view model is the one that we are trying to map to. This is what's being passed back from Square. So it's, I believe it was item dot. If we look at the JSON message, item data dot name. So item data dot name. All right, so that's that. Item view model dot category ID is equal to item data dot I. Actually, this one is actually at the item level. Is equal to item dot ID. Okay. Now category ID. Category ID is equal to item data dot category ID. Okay, now let's try to get the variation information. Actually, we might actually have to do another for each because we want to say variation in item data dot variations. So this is, and we want to move this logic inside of this because otherwise we'll be enumerating a few times. So let's move that logic inside here, and we want to move the add inside this guy. All right, we're almost there. Now, for me to get the view model dot variation ID, I gotta say variation dot ID at this point because this enumeration is actually under here, under these two. So I want this ID, essentially what it is saying. Now I want the next thing, I want the variation name. Variation dot name, or is it in item data again? Variation. Yep, it's actually an item variation data dot name. Item variation dot item variation data dot name. Okay, and now we want the skew. Is equal to variation dot item variation data dot skew. All right, now the next thing is price. Item view model dot price is equal to variation dot item variation. I think it's called price money, but price money is actually a currency, an amount, and that's a long. We want that to be divided by 100, and we want to cast that as a decimal. All right, so obviously there's chances of null exceptions here, so we're going to do some null handling. Let's say not equal to null, then no, then do this divided by 100, else we'll just return 0. But after all of that, we want to cast this damn thing into a decimal. All right, so there's obviously prettier ways to write this, but anyways, what it's saying is like, if this long is not null, then I use this number, in this case here, depending on what it is. Let's say, for example, 1,999. I'm going to take that number divided by 100 to give me the actual like dollar and cent amount. But if this thing is empty, just return it price as 0. And then once that happens, add all this up, and I want to cast that into a decimal, actually, before setting it to price. All right, that's a mouthful, but anyways, now we got view models, we got that, we got everything here. Actually, let's move this view model one level up, just so that we can actually leverage it in the view here. So I want to return the view with the view model. I'm going to play some tricks here. I'm going to delete the default view that's already out there. And then I'm going to stop Visual Studio first. And I'm going to delete the view. And I'm going to use Visual Studio to generate the view for me with the model. So now I was saying like Visual Studio is not detecting a view for this home page index, but I want that's actually binding to this view model type of a list of item view model. So if I right click on views, add views, I'll choose empty for now. We'll name it that. No, let's not use empty. Let's do that again. I want to actually use the add view. I want an MVC view. I want a racer view. All right, add. This is the dialog I was looking for. I want the template to be a list, and the model I want this to be generated on is item view model. And I want this to be a partial view. Hit add. Give it a few minutes. Not a minute, maybe 30 more seconds or so. So for Visual Studio to generate some code to display this data in a friendly format for me. Come on, Visual Studio, you can do it. Okay, so it's generated this HTML file here. Basically, it's if we take a look at it, it created a button to create new, which we don't want. I'm just going to delete that paragraph. But anyways, it's generated a table header with all the columns. And then for each of the items that's inside here, it just generated a way to display it, and also created a few options for me to actually edit and delete stuff. So, but I am not going to use that. So I'll just actually, instead of commenting, I'm just going to delete them. And I'm going to press save. Now let's press play or debug and see what it gave us. So remember, MVC, it's gonna try to, on startup, it's gonna try to inject that iSquare client factory, and on startup, it's gonna reach this index page, which attempts to go out to Square to grab all the items, and we are mapping every one of those items back onto a list of item view models, and we pulled extracted the information from Square into our view model, and we let Visual Studio create a view for us by default. As you can see, it listed it pretty nicely. Well, we can clean it up. We can hide certain columns here and clean it up and make it nicer. But you see it working, right? Tito, Bud Light, 24 pack, blah blah blah, and that. So let's make that look a little nicer first. Let's not display the variation ID. Let's not display the catalog ID, and let's make this the price to string as a current. Actually, that's the display, so I don't need to change that one. Category ID. Let's get rid of that TD. This is the thing. So the toString, change that into a currency. So we got rid of category ID. We got rid of variation ID. We got rid of category item. So let's press save. Let's see if it reloads. It should. What had happened? I'm betting it's not liking my toString to the $sign, so I'll just delete that guy. Okay, so save that. There was an extra decimal point there. All right. Is it really toString? It's not liking it? To currency? Yeah, I'm guessing it's, yeah, we'll handle that in a different way then. All right, for now, let's just use it as a normal price, normal decimal. But yeah, I think you get the point. You can get the data using the Square API and display it on your own websites. On the next video, I'll show you how to store this in the database and then connect it to using Square webhook to update, basically to keep your database along with up to date, to keep your read-only copy up to date with Square's catalog. All right, this video is kind of long. My mouth is running dry. Thanks for watching. Bye.